off and rolling. How's the week been though? You doing some podcasting?
Been, bu- been busy. We did an announcement with Web3 project called Morpheus, and so we've been busy getting that off the ground, and it's been super fun to see that like get set up and get some results and have some good customer stories with that. So
Sure. James Hotson. Is that how I say your last name?
yeah, you cut
Great
out a
last name,
little
by the way.
bit there. Thank you. No one believes me that it's real, but it is.
Yeah, if you look at a lot of the Dutch names, which is where a lot of my heritage is, it seems like they kind of just picked our last names. It's like Vandersteen means of the stone, and when we're now so far removed, it's like we think they were just divined upon us, but it's like no, definitely chosen at some point.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, my Dutch buddy is like De Korver, and it's like, okay, what does that mean? Tell me about Korver. You're from there, or you know?
Right, done, done, done. All right, sweet. We're live and ready to rock. Well,
Great.
episode 47 tightens up today. James Hotson, the Chief Growth Officer with Katara AI. Welcome to the show, James.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Most definitely. Some other things about the intro. Former professional Ironman. Are you still doing races or just taking a break during? Or what's your focus there? Of course, there's a lot of Ironmen who go, late into their lives and continue with that. So.
It's something that I can do forever. And, there was a period where I was doing 6 or 7 of them a year. Right now, I am fully in just staying in just good enough shape to hang out with the buddies and stay fit enough to keep up with them on the bike and in the pool. But not doing any races, mostly because I have a 8-week-old and I'm really excited about dad life. And I don't want that, to take that away or to be away from that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I can resonate with you there. I have a 3-year-old. So having gone through that over the last few years, it's a big change. How's that feeling? How's the impact of that?
It's the best. I wish I did it way sooner. I think being a dad is totally undersold.
Boy or girl?
Boy. I've been little baby boy.
Got him doing any kind of acrobatics and whatnot yet? That was one thing, like early with my son, just like kind of like light movements in different directions, kind of getting him that body familiarity, a little bit of that athleticism. But obviously in the early stages, you want to keep him in a good spot.
A little. I've been stretching his arms so he can get the shoulder mobility a little bit, but not too much yet. He's just coming into the world. He's still just a little ball.
Yep. It takes time, but it has definitely paid dividends. I've seen with my son. Just kind of, it was like an experiment that I did. Of course, I'm sure you've seen, what is it, the baby Hercules? Remember that back in the day?
Yeah.
Now I think that guy builds AI companies and it's doing his PhD or something. So,
right.
But yeah, that early training definitely sits in well. But in terms of your life, things that you're working on, obviously great to be a father. But talk to us a little bit about your entrepreneurial career and some of the exits that you've had to date, leading sales, growth, and GTM.
Yeah, I got really lucky, and I've been in sales or some capacity of revenue for a business for my entire career. And so, right out of college, I went to USC, and my senior year, I won a venture seed competition, and they gave me $5,000 to go start whatever type of company I wanted, and that was really fun. And I started my own direct-to-consumer e-commerce business. This was early 2010, so this isn't what it is today. Of like everybody starting a t-shirt company on Shopify. I don't even think we were on Shopify to start. But I noticed as I was selling these shoes online, the data became really important. The marketing became really important. And, shoes are not like wine. They don't get better with age, and inventory and dealing with, 6,000, 10,000 pairs of shoes on a boat from China, and tariffs changing, which is really relevant today, even though it was, relevant back then too. We'd place a PO at 4% tariff and it'd land and it'd be at 20%. And that happened to us multiple times. Just because of timing of things and the way it takes. And so I was like, what would be more interesting? Maybe I could help e-commerce companies use this data. And at the time, there were 2 co-founders and data scientists that had already had an initial idea for a company, had some kind of basic MVP set up, but no real customers, no revenue yet. And I got really excited about their product because they were helping companies based off of all their Shopify data and the order history and the email addresses they were getting and the browsing behavior on the site. They're helping them identify, lifetime value, what's their future spend going to be, what products they might be interested in. And the name of that company was Retention Science. And I absolutely loved the product. We ended up working with about 500 brands. Target was our 10th customer. I came in as, founding AE is what they call it today, but we didn't even have that title. And, I did everything from, outbound, SDR type functions to ultimately running the sales team. And I had 12, 4 AEs and then a team of BDRs under me, just running this company. We doubled the business 4 years in a row. We were on the Inc. 5000 in 2018. Then we're in the Inc. 5000 in 2019 at 10 million in revenue ARR. In the 500s, I was so upset we didn't break, we weren't 400 because the Inc. 500 sounds so much better than Inc. 5000. And we ended up
10 times better.
10 times better. And we ended up selling the company to Constant Contact, which I think they're the number one email marketing provider out there. And that was just like a great experience, from zero pre-revenue. I love all the brands we work with. I was basically in with the CMO of Dollar Shave Club on like a monthly basis for about 5 or 6 years as they were growing during that really amazing period of growth that they were in, all the way through their acquisition to Unilever. Did something similar with Schmitz, who also sold to Unilever for a crazy amount of money. And so it was just really exciting, very fun to be in the space. And it really showed me what AI can do. We were doing a ton of collaborative filtering. It is nothing compared to what exists today, even though we were talking about our company as a big data AI machine learning company, which we were doing. It just didn't have the horsepower that I'm seeing today in the market.
For sure. A good friend of mine who was actually on the podcast, episode 44, AJ, and I worked with him in 2020, commercializing his, actually at that time it was professional services around AI, essentially custom AI development, whatnot, 2020. And he jokes now that OpenAI has done all the marketing for him nowadays with it when it comes to customers' appetite. So,
yep, it does.
As soon as ChatGPT dropped.
And there's the new category, they're no longer talking about SEO optimization. They're all talking about LLM optimization and how do we get in there and what are the hacks to get in there. It's really amazing. And I don't know about you, but I find myself, using Gronk or Perplexity more and more every single day, and then checking out the links that it provides me. And even Cursor is like choosing my technology for me. If I want to write something, it's picking what database product do I want? It's a whole new way to go to market that is completely different than a decade ago.
Exactly, and enabling a lot of people to have access to this development experience and the ability to put out products, which we can, probably a later subject we can talk about. But you're talking about your early days in the shoe industry. You ever read Shoe Dog?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect.
I actually have a copy on my nightstand right now. That book is a great story. It's just so wonderful. And the way he talks about it, that definitely helped me keep going. But some of the stories about how he, pay Nisho first, when he's talking about how he doesn't pay bills too. And, the shoes are special. There's a magic to them. Like, funny enough, I didn't realize how lucky I was at the time. I actually had our designer was the same guy who created the Nike Dunk. His name was Peter Moore. And so I was sending designs back and forth with Peter Moore. He was no longer at Nike. He was doing his own consulting business. But there isn't a bigger shoe design legend in the game. He's the guy in the basement of the movie when, they're talking about Michael Jordan's shoe. And so it was a pretty amazing experience that I was able to, have working with that guy.
Yeah, great book. And you're talking about the tariffs there. That's what brought that out. Yeah, him dealing with all those situations and the time it takes to get the shoes and distribute the shoes, and that wonderful book for anyone who has not read it. Phil Knight.
Good one. It's a really good story.
So in the process that you were explaining, and I do want to go back through your stories, some of the other companies, but to really talk about the present day, because you mentioned that with Retention Science, AI was known and executed differently, although there are some similarities. But then you're talking about how what was available then is so different from what's available today in terms of just the natural horsepower and what we're able to do with it. So now with Katara, talk a little bit more about that and maybe a client success story or example that proves and demonstrates exactly what you're saying.
I think the easy way to think about it is, there was AI previously, right? But it was memorization, it was very linear, and it'd break pretty easily if you got off track. And so think of that as like a math problem. If I ask you 2 plus 2, it's 4 because that's memory, and we all know that. If I ask you 37 times 17, that's reasoning, because you actually have to go through the process of doing the math problem. I don't have that memorized. You'd get there, it just might take a little bit longer. And so we've shifted now to having reasoning, which is an amazing thing, where if the AI gets stuck or needs to make a decision, it can actually think through that process. And so, LLMs are something that a lot of people talk about and, are very well known at this point. But the nuance of the difference is really like tremendously impactful, because before you would have to get a marketing plan, have it be very linear, and then there's certain small pieces you could make dynamic or personalized. And that's what the AI was doing. It was picking maybe the best product or the best photo or the best offer or the best time to send it based off of past data. Now we can use that to be really almost like the full funnel, where we can start to give your marketer superpowers. We can start to give your customer support person superpowers by like helping it reason, helping it do a job better. So it's just an amazing time. And that's what really sparked, for the last 6 months, we've been heads down on building the Katara platform and really like helping people adopt AI, helping people take advantage of what is now available to them.
So what about a specific success story that you've had implementing some of those technologies?
Yeah, so right now we're working with, it's been fun for me because it's a newer industry, but a couple Web3 companies. And so, this can apply to any business, but every single company has customers, or I guess every single company that does have customers, they have customers asking them questions about the company or where they're at. And every single customer comes at you from a different point and from a different experience. And so previously, before LLMs, you could write rules and say, if then do this, if that, if they need to reset their password, here's all the, the Zapier flow that you need to set up to get them to reset the password. And you could automate a lot of that today. And maybe you could automate, I'd say pre-LLM, you could probably at best automate maybe 30 or 40% of customer support tickets. Today, now we have a customer that just started using us. We, in about 5 minutes, we're able to take all their data on their website, and we're creating what's called a RAG, which is basically a little database on top of, it's a vector database on top of an LLM. And then so that we have really specific information on this company. And then we can take their GitHub. And so we know the entire code base. And so for, developer forward or API forward tech companies, which a lot of Web3 companies are that, we can look at their code base. And that's amazing because the platforms are always evolving and always changing. And the documentation is always lagging. You might deploy 10 features in a day and the docs might be out of date for a week or months at a time. And so we can constantly monitor the what's going on at the company and constantly update and generate new content, which is amazing. And I think that is like very, very helpful for them. So we come in and we say, hey, you have, an existing 240 tech docs right now. Let's read them all. Let's categorize them all. Let's like make sure they follow a framework. We've been using the Diataxis framework so that they're easier to understand and they're more consistent. And then that makes it easier, faster for developers to find the right information they're looking for. Plus, if someone asks the company a question, right now we support Telegram, we support Discord right now, Slack, Microsoft Teams are all coming. Our website widget, so you could literally chat on the site, is coming. Should be out in maybe a week or two. But we can meet a customer where they are, and whatever tedious question they might have, we can answer. We can tell you how confident we are in the answer, and we can cite those sources. And so now we're able to solve 80-85% of questions with a 90% confidence level in 30 seconds versus 15 minutes. And so the big success is we had a guy, his name, one company we're working with actually is a little bit more, it's a little bit better of a story, but His name is Anton, and he didn't even work for the company. He was just like he was so passionate about what was going on. He was answering everybody's questions to kind of fill in. But Anton also sleeps. You know, he goes to bed, he takes a vacation, he's not on payroll. And so when he was gone, like these tickets would actually, you know, kind of pile up. We could basically clone Anton. We could mark him as like a super user. We could take his responses, give those responses better weight, and then we could answer constantly as if we were like Anton, which now he can take a break and he gets cited. So it's like a very cool thing to see all of these questions be answered right away. And then what we're seeing is previously, if a developer got stuck doing an integration, what would happen? You would have to call a meeting with the VP of engineering or whatever engineers lead up that project or are responsible for that piece of the platform, get them all on a call, come to them with your problem, solve it. And that might take a week or two, and there might need to be it could be a month. Now we can unblock these guys like right away based off of all the data. And we can actually proactively say, hey, you know, as example, our API changed based on the code. You might need to update your existing integration with us in this way. So it's really like very cool technology, and it's totally like a revenue acceleration tool, because all of these companies today are, you know, more integrations means more revenue because it's more people on the platform. So right. That's like it. I think it's a very real impact, real use case for these LLMs being absolutely great at, you know, providing a ton of value and helping, you know, a human or a customer support person like 10x their output, 100x their output potentially.
Right. And then really, like you said, the delta between what was possible before versus today, 30, 40 down to that 85.
Yeah.
What gets it to 100? What's the gap between it getting to be able to handle pretty much every single question that comes
in? I mean, we're recording
better data.
Better data, definitely. Better data, real-time data is definitely like, I think thanks for teaming me up on that. I mean, that is the number one thing, right? Like if you can get more real-time data, and I think the real world example for people listening is like, I've personally started to use Gronk more because it has a lot more real-time, more recent data. And so you can ask it more, you know, newsworthy type questions and get, you know, more recent information back, because things on the internet are moving so fast that if I ask, you know, ChatGPT something, it might be based on, you know, the 03 training, which might have been 3 or 4 months ago.
Right.
And so, yeah, better data, better quality of data is definitely like, it's garbage in, garbage out with the data. Like it's the food for the models and your agent. And so that really does solve a ton. I also think that what gets it from the 85% to closer to 100, you know, I think there will always be a percentage of people that will want to talk to a human. It will just, there will, you know, be that human to human type connection, or there will be such niche problems, you know, such an edge case that, you know, requires some sort of approval that you're going to need a human to jump into some of these. But what gets it closer, let's call it 99%. I think as these models improve, I think that will help. I think also easy creation of specific data and then updating that, right? Like my company, there's always a conversation going on internally. There's always a conversation going on externally. It's constantly changing. Every 24 hours is a new company. So keep that up to date. And so it's like creating those RAGs. You know, we use MongoDB and Pinecone to create those databases, and making it really easy for companies to literally just drop a link, say, hey, this is our website. Tell us everything we put on our own website, and then answer it for the questions. You know, now a customer support person can drop their support playbook. And, you know, previously maybe you had a few hundred people or a few thousand people, VAs, you know, in the Philippines. Now you can have like a carbon copy of your best VA that is completely scalable based on the existing playbook. So yeah, easier ways to get that data in so you can test and iterate and tune things definitely helps.
And a couple different avenues there, one of which is just using different models for different uses, different applications. And you also talked about Perplexity. That has definitely become part of my daily check-in. Just when it comes to the internet, instead of, you know, going on social media or something, just going into Perplexity and figuring out what's new.
Yep.
Very good tool. But you know, talking about the platforms and again the different usage of these kind of, you know, models. I read something yesterday from Meter and METR, and it was about how AI task capacity is doubling every 6 months.
Amazing.
Yeah, doubling every 6 months. And what was very interesting from that point was they tested all the different models and their ability to do tasks. And this surprised me, but Claude was essentially able to handle 40% more task time. So if we're talking about things that take a long, a lot of time, that was a key driver and factor. So test different models, and when you talk about the real time availability of information, that's very relevant to developers, because if there's a new frontier paper or something that comes out, you could be, if you're not seeking that information, feeding it back in, you could be developing something that's 3 months old and you don't need it, or there's a better solution and a better path.
Yep, exactly. There's a pretty interesting concept that I've been talking about a lot lately, which is this idea of the world needs chefs and the world needs cooks, right? And the chef at the Michelin star restaurant, they're creative, they're coming up with really high caliber dishes. That is your latest LLM model. That is, whatever Claude has produced, most recently, or O3, or Mini High, whatever you're using, that is like the chef at the moment. But you don't always need a chef. If you're cooking fries, you need a cook. And I think the cost of these models, people are starting to understand and optimize. And so I'm really excited about like model optimization, when to use them and when to not use them. Because you don't need to be using your chef to answer the really simple repetitive questions at your $1 sign restaurant that's just cooking fries. But at your Michelin star, high end, 5-course prefix menu, maybe you want your chef. And so
absolutely,
what we're seeing is like, okay, maybe you can start to even have a script that says, hey, optimize which model I'm going to use. Instead of using the $75 per 1,000 token model, use the $4 per token model on this particular, because it will get you good enough. And I think people are going to start talking about optimizing model spend really soon here, just because like no one's really caught on how much value is they're getting from that $20 OpenAI subscription. I came across, like, they just launched their photo generation this week, right?
Yep.
And it's really high quality according to the internet. The cost of electricity to generate one of those images is the equivalent of charging your iPhone from 0 to 100% every time you do one image. And everyone has that reaction that like they raise their, oh my God, every single time I mention that to someone. And so it's like, it's a ton of compute going into every single one of those images. And so that's your chef. Like, great, make that be your hero image, but maybe for your newsletter email, you use a smaller design tool that's not using your top model that's extremely expensive and consumes a ton of energy. So it'll be interesting to see, where we are in another 6 months with all these models and all the costs of all of them.
And to go back to, you mentioned about Web3. So I spent a good amount of time with different Web3 companies, financing, funding, etc. And a lot of them operate. There's the cryptocurrencies side, which actually was interesting ruling from the SEC that meme coins are not securities. I don't know if you saw that. So now essentially what that means is this whole pump and dump thing they can't enforce it with meme coins. Okay. They just won't, because it's not a security. So it's like going to a casino.
Yeah.
And maybe there'll be later regulations that'll come out. But basically what I'm getting at is there's a speculative side of Web3, but then there's the actual real value creation side of Web3, which these foundations act as platforms. And platforms, what's important is mindshare, ecosystems, developer support, which is Katara, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I think the thing that's interesting to me about Web3 is it's another set of essentially payment rails that an AI agent could use or tap into. And so, that plays really nicely if we need to drop some sort of tokens into some wallet that the AI has access to, and then it can go, like, it could literally pay for its compute. It can pay for its inference. It could pay, for all these things automatically. And I think that's really interesting versus the Web 2 version. Not that it's, much different or worse. It's a Stripe integration, it's API calls, and it's these things. There just tends to be not as easy of a transition to those things. And so, we're working with decentralized networks that provide inference. We're working with decentralized networks that can actually do tasks. And so it's an interesting space right now. It also is a bunch of really smart, people that are kind of forward thinking. And so they're more open to, if they have a Discord of 10,000 users or a Discord of 100,000 users, they're more open to throwing something in there and seeing how it works, and testing out our chatbot right away, versus it might take me 6 months to go talk with like a big bank like a UBS Financial or something like that, and then we're in there after 6 months. So it's more of like a beachhead strategy for proof of concept. We are working with some Web2 companies right now, and again, the underlying expertise is almost identical. Just the output is people in Web2 live in Slack and Microsoft Teams and email, and they do less of Telegram and Discord. So it's just a different integration. That's it.
Mhm. And I don't know if you saw that as well. The robot that they trained to be a Michelin star level chef, basically using AI and robotics.
Yeah,
and a lot of people said that's something that would never happen.
right.
Like it's too fine motor and all that kind of thing, but nope.
I mean, the robots are really interesting. The humanoids are very interesting to me right now, because you can buy one for, let's call it, essentially $20,000, and then you can train it to do certain things. And if it can do the things that I don't want to do in my day for me, great. And I don't know what the cost of ownership is today and what it will be in a year, but maybe that goes down to $1. And I think that it goes even lower than that eventually. But if I could buy a robot for myself, I think there's tremendous personal use. I think it's obvious use in things like warehouses and 3PLs and factories and those kinds of things. I think Amazon has 700,000 of these robots already. Maybe not humanoids, but different types to move packages around warehouses and ship them. And so it's coming. It's gonna be using it. It'll be an interesting world to go from the Waymo's out on my street right now to there's a humanoid robot walking a dog on my street right now. And is that in 5 years? Is that in 10 years? I don't know, but it feels like it's definitely an inevitable reality.
Mm-hmm. And based off of your experience as an entrepreneur and what you guys are building with Katara, and I guess really how you see the broader market, one of the things we were just talking about there is really the distinction between, we could call it on a simple basis Web 2, Web 3, but really it's more about this open source versus closed source, kind of how companies are growing, and what do you think is really the future? Is it companies with a hybrid model where they're leveraging an ecosystem where developers are coming in, or is it this maintain the closed source, scale the company, protect the IP and exit, or continue to stay private, like we've seen with, let's say, OpenAI and others? What do you really think is the shift there?
I don't know if I have a strong opinion on whether things are more open source or less open source, or if they're more centralized or more decentralized. I do think that moving forward, we will see more solopreneurs where they have a team of 4 or 5 agents, or we'll see teams that are lean and mean, and it's a 4-human team with also 4 AIs, and they're doing 100 million in annual recurring revenue and have $1 billion valuation. I think that is kind of what we're moving towards. And then within it, does it make sense? We talk about open sourcing the stuff we're building all the time, and does it make sense for us to do right now or later? Right now it's not open source, but it very well could be in the future. And I think if the thing I like, the lens I like walking this through is the X Prize, right? $1 million if you can build a really cool item, depending on whatever it might be. If you win, you get your $1 million. Your team wins and you get your $1 million funding. But maybe there's 100 teams or there's 1,000 teams. You're getting $1 million of value from those 100 teams to do the work, to go get that input. And so I do think you can kind of logic jump that to why open source would make sense, because you're going to get all of these developers coming up with new crazy ideas and having the time to build them. And, of course, there's going to be a handful of them that are a beautiful, amazing use case that come up with a ton of value for a lot of people. And so that is one argument for open source. It'll be interesting to see, if companies shift more open sourced, and is that actually better or is that actually worse?
Yeah, it brings up what you said, brings up an interesting point. If you look at a lot of the giants that are already public companies that are innovating with agents like Salesforce or other type companies, even let's say ServiceNow, is getting more into agents. Of course, that's become some of the marketing focus is agents because people are seeing that that's the next step. And it is where a lot of the value is being created on top of the models.
Yep.
But companies that are starting up that are earlier, having that extra depth mind share could be really the difference maker between hyperscale and hyper growth, especially as we're seeing some of these companies. It's not an exact perfect case, but it's almost a hybrid where with like Cursor and other these kind of like rapid hyper growth IDEs and whatnot that are AI based is leveraging these kind of open communities. They're not open source, but they're open communities in this whole kind of build in public thing. But there's got to be something, the X factor in the growth trajectory of a lot of these early stage companies.
I mean, yeah, I think we talk about the concept of a AI product manager, right? And so you take that concept of you're constantly listening to your customers, you're constantly listening to the trends, and then feeding that back into the product. And I think Cursor is an amazing example of that. I think there's 4, founders, and they're all fairly young of Cursor, and like that product over the last 6 months has become tremendous. Like it's improved so much. And they're probably doing it off of just customer feedback, and it's really a good product, and they've turned every single person into a developer, which is pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then really flipping it inside out. You talk about leverage, that economic model behind it of, come on, we'll give you a free trial, and after that, we'll bill you on a usage basis. And they have subscriptions though as well. But basically, really just opening it up for people to become the creator, it doesn't matter if you're a developer or not, but you can hop on our platform and start creating something, right? We're seeing that rocket path hyper growth.
Yep, we are. What's one thing that's kind of interesting to us, and we've shied away from it, is if we understand if they're a very big project and they'd be a great customer, if they're a DAO, we almost don't even put in the effort. And the reason why is like we know we got to go get 20 approvals from 20 different people, and some of them don't want to participate. And so there are drawbacks to having things structured in a different way than what we're seeing kind of with the traditional. Okay, you have an executive team, and then you have VPs below them that are like executing and managing, the actual programs. I mean, it's so nice for me when we're in a project and we're close to the finish line. It's like, hey, okay, we just need to get the thumbs up from the CEO. Great. Can I call him or her and get that? And then, we start moving forward versus you could get left in this DAO limbo of just needing, you have 19 thumbs up and you got, you need the last one and you can't find that person, and that doesn't make any sense. And so, there's pros and cons to doing all of these kinds of centralized versus decentralized types of companies.
Exactly, and natural selection will have its way for sure.
True. Yeah.
That's how it is though with innovation, right? These are like the cleanest examples of people trying to innovate at the core level of how companies are run. But we'll see how that all shakes out. And I guess one kind of insight that can come from that is closed source infra, right? Your core product, your platform there is closed source, but then you have an extensible way to open up to developers and builders and people who are building different platforms and agents kind of things are plugins and apps on top of that.
Yep, exactly. And I think our CTO, his name's David, he is really good with that type of vision. We have a short-term goal right now of, hey, let's just make the product usable and people can onboard themselves and, get some immediate value, and they can plug in their Discord bot and they can train it, in the same session, and it can be live. Great. Long-term, how do we make certain containers? We're going to have people who want to run models locally, and we're totally agnostic on the AI side. So it doesn't matter what model you want to use, like you can plug it in. Our expertise is in how we set up the structure and how, the Python code talks with the Go code, which talks with Pinecone, which is, our RAG or vector DB, and how all those things interact. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is how much work it is to maintain and to just keep these AI systems and workflows running. And so, one of our ways we can add a ton of value is just coming in and, helping support that infrastructure of, running all the AI stuff you need for the workflow to actually do the result that you want. Because people can write an agent. It's like, it's all the nuance to it that gets really complicated and tough. And, I don't know about you, but I'll build an agent and I'll run it locally on my machine, and like, then I'll get tired of writing, going in terminal every morning to have it run, and then I'll go put it on Heroku and it'll run every day, and then I'll forget about it, and like it won't run for 3 or 4 days because I've been at a conference. And so it's like, why not just use a platform that built that purpose base so you can have your agents constantly running and working?
For sure, exactly. Yeah, it's like we don't want to recreate the human error, because we all have human error, things we're really good at, things we're not. And yeah, sometimes it's like you have so much going on that you just need that thing running consistently versus running like you would, right? Kind of your mirror.
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about in our first conversation was about content and community and things like this, doing a podcast, building networks and relationships. And we're opening up a broader conversation about ownership and really just the future of value creation and wealth creation in essence. Because I was reading another paper and it was talking about, it was titled Strategic Wealth Creation in the Age of Hyper Advanced AI. It's a different term, but essentially that was the gist of it. And it talks about how true wealth is going to be created looking forward by those who own the largest share of agents producing valuable work. So that's sort of the next level, which is, again, the thesis around Katara in many ways is the ownership of the AI agents is how wealth is going to be created. And that's really what is determined, is how many agents you have running, what work is being delivered. So talk a little bit more about that, really just, I guess, agents as a whole, your outlook on that. What is going to be changing? What jobs, that's the thing people always talk about is, what about my job? And you mentioned the OpenAI model that just came out. And now you can easily go and create an ad that is stellar with essentially one line. You can take a picture and one line prompt and say, create an ad for my business. I don't know if you saw it. Yeah, there was one where someone took a picture of an office, just a set of desks and a couple chairs, and they said, turn this into a McDonald's ad. And it was like, boom, and it looked like a beautiful McDonald's ad. It was like, come on to McDonald's, something like that. But there's a lot of change going on. So give us your inside view.
It's equally exciting and terrifying, right? I wake up every day being like, cool, what new cool thing can I do with my computer today? And then I'm also like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Or does the thing that we've spent our last 6 months grinding on still matter? And I think, I forget if it was you and I talking about this previously, but there were somewhere around 20,000 companies or softwares being put out a day. And when we were building Retention Science, this was early 2012, the barrier to entry was very high. I think there were probably about 100, maybe even less, marketing tools for Shopify companies, traditional SaaS. And now there's 20,000 a day. When we exited, there were probably about 7,000 to 10,000 of those types of SaaS tools. But now your SaaS tool is a lot less valuable because it's so much easier to build. And it's so much easier to get, closer to the exact use case you want. Maybe in a year from now, we're not going to have a CRM because we're going to home grow our own CRM, which is something that has been frowned upon for the last decade. And so, the value of the softwares go down because you can just build your own pretty quickly. And I think kind of framing this on like what it actually is, because what is an AI agent at the end of the day? Because an agent is a model plus some tooling on a loop, right? And that tooling can be, if you break down like what is a tool, that is, going to the Twitter API and reading all the tweets, or I guess X API and reading all the posts. You can now build like a REST API integration based on that code and docs. And so now you have like a model plus some code and docs on a loop, and you can have your own, AI running, doing basically anything you want. The barrier that I'm seeing is it requires a ton of resources to have these AIs just constantly on, and it's really resource intensive to keep like this AI persistently on a long-lived connection to a thing like X or whatever tool you want it to be connected to. And so I think whoever can also nail the data piece is going to do very well, on top of being able to create all these great agents that add a ton of value. And I think there will be some sort of like LinkedIn for AI agents where it's like, I want the best cold calling agent, I want the best email marketing agent, I want the best customer support agent. And like, there'll be probably industry specific, and then there'll be nuance between each one. And whoever made those agents should get some sort of royalty. That'd be pretty cool. For every, maybe it's a percentage of tokens or compute use, or maybe it's percentage like I'm starting to see results as a service. Maybe it's, your traditional, like, here is a commission for your AI agent based on the results that it delivered. And so to the beginning of your question of like community and change and, all these companies, it's like, well, if there's 20,000 new SaaS products tomorrow, what becomes really valuable? It becomes your tribe and your community. And I think we're going to continue to see people building more niche products specific to a specific community. I would see, most of the value becoming in building and nurturing that community. Like, hey, I know Jacob, I like what Jacob talks about. He brings on interesting guests, so I'm going to follow him kind of. And if you were to launch something, you would have instant like feedback on that product, and you'd have an instant market to talk to. And then in a year from now, if you launch a new product, same situation. And so I think the value of these communities becomes much more important than it ever has. And we're going to see less people like, puffing their chest out and drawing their ego on being CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and more people like, oh, like I build software and my community is huge. And it's, here are my stats of my community and this is what they can do tomorrow. So I think community is everything moving forward, which is another reason why we're so focused on kind of that DevRel or community manager role as well.
Yeah, it's essential. It's critical to everything. And as the flow of just say activity continues to migrate more towards developers being able to do many things, and then empower agents to do things like content or different avenues of the business, finance, operations, then it's a valuable thesis there.
Yeah.
By being connected to those communities.
Yep, absolutely. And maybe you have a community that supports you in your role, right? As an example, like my little sister Alicia is like the #1 salesperson at Carta. We all use Carta for our equity cap tables, and her and I were talking last week, and she closed 200% compared to the next best person. And I'm like proud big brother, but she could take that skill set anywhere, and she could kind of build that network and like anywhere she gets plugged in, because her community is like these great network of high stakes people that have bought from her before. She's tremendously valuable now. And so I think everyone can apply that in their role, whether you're an email marketer and you have great relationships with copywriters and designers. It's like that whole thing is really the key component of being successful and being a top performer.
Building trust and value at scale.
100%. Much simpler than I just said it.
Right. So one of the things to go along with that, your little sister example, is so we talk about, you mentioned all the different SaaS tools that are emerging. And I think I can't remember, he was the CEO of one of the big model companies, or chief product officer or somebody like that. He was saying that you shouldn't learn you don't need to learn how to code anymore. Of course, it's still valuable because not everything is solved with an LLM, but he's saying that you shouldn't learn how to code anymore. If we kind of look at, you mentioned barriers and differentiation, and what really will create value and I actually had this conversation somewhat on another podcast, but it's sort of the reemergence of polymaths, people who have experience in ops, in finance, in marketing, in sales, and can spin up a product and get it to market and understand what the real problems are in the market, where the delta is, and where instead of just building tools which could be gone away by the next model update, building things that are more foundational and fundamental that connect into the broader picture of where the world is going.
Yep. I mean, I got hooked on this quote, and I'm blanking on who said it, but it was like, first, learn to sell, and then second, learn to build, And if you can do both really well, you can be unstoppable. And I think with the tooling we have, like, should you learn to code right this second? The answer is I don't know. Like 5 years ago, it was a clear absolutely yes. It's a high value job. Like you'll get a great salary and you'll get a great experience. You'll be around smart people. Like now I'm not so sure, because everyone can be a developer. I still do think there's a fairly high bar, because learning Cursor is intimidating. And it's also very frustrating if you don't understand the basics of how things work. You know, I took this in high school, which was forever ago. I took this HTML class, and that HTML class has given me so much foundation on what I'm doing today, because I can kind of understand how the computer thinks and how it works. And so it helps me troubleshoot and get forward. And so maybe don't become a computer science, major right now. If I was choosing, university right now, would it be computer science or would it be like quantum computing? I might go quantum.
Yeah, because definitely. You're right.
It's like maybe new and interesting, and there's going to be fewer people learning that. I think there's the ability to learn to code is just like not as needed now, but having that foundation is super helpful. And it's a reason why I spend, a couple days, a week, just like kind of in lockdown coding, playing around with different tools, because I want to stay sharp and I want to learn. And I know these are going to translate to better marketing, better content for Katara, better sales. Like all this stuff is just going to, how can we, use the leverage of code to automate an entire sales funnel or automate an entire awareness campaign? I think we're going to have to write some code or some prompts to be able to get that done today.
Exactly. It's like mastering leverage would be, and it's not something they necessarily teach in business school, but mastering leverage, where it's the code, it's the people, it's the market, the need, things, the capital, being able to raise the money and all those kind of things is the core.
Yeah. Yep.
So of that meter paper, and I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but I think it's Model Ethics and Testing Alignment or something like that, right? It's some research-driven organization. But in that same path, if we're taking that agents and models are able to do tasks that are twice as complex every 6 months, then over 5 years, by 2030, there's another thing I'll share about 2030, is but basically by 2030 that you'll be able to pop into a Cursor or a ChatGPT or wherever. You can generate code using AI, and it'll be able to do a months-long project in a couple hours. So a current and basically the testing group, the baseline group that they used were people who went to Ivy League universities who have been an active developer for 5 years. They basically took the time in which it took them to solve a specific problem or develop a specific product or app or something, and a variety of tasks they actually tested them on. And then the current model ability, and then extrapolated the rate of change over the last 7 years to the next 5. And so basically by 2030, months-long software projects will now take a few hours just using artificial intelligence. And that's assuming a constant rate of change versus what we've seen. So
and right, there's Moore's law too. So maybe it's here in 2.5 years, right? It's like, we don't know how quickly that could be. I think that's like, yes, for the LLM and AI side of the house, probably doable. But we're going to run into some interesting dynamics, I think, because the cost of doing a months-long worth of work project, I think that cost for inference and electricity and compute and doing it all potentially could be more than the cost of a full-time employee or the team of employees that you need to do it. And so, we also need to be figuring out the energy piece of this puzzle, because it is a ton of energy and compute needed to do all the compute. And so are we also going to, hopefully have access to like a nuclear energy type situation where that can power these data centers and all that stuff? Because I think right now we're so lucky on how cheap the cost of these models are, because they're all subsidized by all the VC money going in there, that in 5 years, I might be priced out of doing that month-long AI exercise. Like OpenAI already has a $20,000 a month product, right? Like, what does that actually cost you to do that? And so I'm excited. I know is it going to be possible? Absolutely. Is it going to be accessible to, myself and you? I don't know. It might be really, really expensive.
Then it would come back down to those factors of leverage though, as well. Being able to raise the money, solve the problem, discover. Yeah. what the
I mean,
next step is.
you get a SBA loan to go power your AI agent. I mean, that's a crazy world. And yeah, totally. Are you getting a bank loan because you're buying this agent that can do this task? We know it's going to generate $100,000 of revenue a month. Wow, what a world! And could exist.
And so you in your first job, you were at UBS, right? What did you do there?
Oh, that was man. This was
2008.
this was 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
No joke. Every day in that office, there was one less person coming in. I was a summer intern, 2007, 2008, and I was just kind of getting a feel for the world on like what did I want to do with my life. I'd actually just been cut from the USC baseball team, so I was really just trying to it was my first adventure into business, and like financial management was interesting. I worked in the Culver City office, and so we had a bunch of like C and B level celebrities coming in all the time. My boss actually worked for Ari Emanuel, the guy for CAA previously before. And so it was just like an interesting time to be in finance. To be honest, felt like wealth management was a little bit like watching paint dry because we were just putting, money that people didn't really care about into products they didn't really know about. And that those products would grow on it because they were a little bit less risk a lot of the time, like slower than the actual individual stocks. And so yeah, also the market was going, it couldn't have gone down any faster, right? And so I was too naive to realize how bad it was. If I would have like been a little bit more 30,000 foot view, I would be like, oh, okay, I'll wait till maybe the bottom. And then 2009 could have been the best time to start that career, right? And be in that and just ride the wave up all the way until like pretty much like 2022, right?
Exactly. The reason I bring that up is because if we look at present, so you talk about VC subsidy money, the cost of the models, how that actually, we're getting into is how the adoption and growth of the agent market is projected to expand. That was the other 2030 stat. Is essentially the current AI agent market is about 5 billion. This was done, I think, earlier this year, end of 2024. Okay. So it was the 2025 AI agent market 5 billion, and a lot of people go, well, what do you mean? There's already this, there's already that. Well, that's fun. Those are foundational models. They're differentiating between actually AI agents being adopted in workflows and monetizing in that way. Sure. So by 2030, the market is projected to be 500 billion.
Yeah.
So literally a 100x over 5 years, which is phenomenal growth. And I bring up the finance piece because, in 2008 is a very relevant time. Massive market fluctuations. There's a lot of things that are hard or impossible to account for that if we look at right now in terms of the advancement of technology, I'm bullish, but I have a market background myself, done a lot of trading and different things in finance. So I'm bullish, what the next 5 to 10 years looks like. But we never kind of want to fall into that trap where it's like, well, this time is different. But I think kind of the underlying is the emergence of these transformative technologies. You talk about quantum, which is getting closer and closer, and there's something we can talk about that. But AI, obviously, agents and the growth there. How, of course, it's a big question, but when it comes to kind of how you're looking at those market factors, and I think really just to tie it back down to the conversation that we had, maybe there's a point where the model is priced out versus just having a human do it. So talk a little bit more about just deeper and what your perspective is on that over the next 5 years and the explosive growth in the AI agent market.
Well, 5 billion seems really low to me, like for the amount of value that I think it's already delivering. I think we're still early, and I think some of the folks in the industry that are maybe a little bit more jaded, they're like, yeah, the real world use cases aren't what people promise yet, but I think it's delivering a ton of value. I'm using the tools daily to help do my job better, and I think what do humans want, the most is they want well, I don't know about all humans, but most humans are pretty lazy and they want convenience. And so I've integrated this into my own daily workflow, right? Like level 0 is just, hey, I'm going to use an LLM to do some of my tasks that I was going to do anyway. So before I send most emails, I drop it into ChatGPT. I say, proofread this, copy paste it, and ask it, and maybe I format it a little bit. That saves me maybe 10, 15 minutes of like proofreading a full on email that needed some thoughtful response. So like, I think that's how most people should use it today. And maybe every single one of us has an AI that becomes our, AI kind of assistant that's constantly monitoring our emails and messages and communications. And I think there's a tool called Lindy.ai. I have not used them fully yet, but they claim to do some of this stuff for you. And that could be, if it can save me an hour and a half to 2 hours a day of like inbox notification communication management, I get those 2.5 hours a day to go be more productive. So I think that is really interesting, and kind of talking on your experience with the with coming from finance. I think we're having like the equivalent of our BlackBerry moment. When the first traders were on the floor without email on their phone, they were at a huge disadvantage, because the guy who had his BlackBerry on Wall Street, he could get information a little bit faster and be a little bit smarter about what trades or what stocks to pick, and he could make essentially more money. And so I think we're having that moment with reasoning, where the barrier for you to build, everyone could have, you could have your Jacob AI bot just constantly trading all day long based on the parameters you want. He never misses anything as long as the data feeds are set up, and that could be going all day. And so now you have Jacob, your skill set as a trader, running completely all the time. And then you can go do podcast Jacob and spend time doing that. Be doing both, right? You're basically doubling your output. And so maybe we're in a world where we have access to, all these AI agents, and we have the same capabilities that maybe the hedge funds were using, previously, but now I can do it from my living room, from my laptop, with all just my, MacBook Air or whatever it might be. You can run like a DeepSeek R1 model locally on that, and it costs almost nothing.
Right. So this actually brings up a good, I'm just blanking on the term, but avatar. So you mentioned the podcasting AI, Jacob, AJ Malik, I mentioned him already earlier. He is right now, I did podcast, and during the show, he had the idea. He's like, what if we had it where, and you've seen this where, I think it was Reid Hoffman, he interviewed himself, or the AI version of himself, and vice versa. Well, AJ's like, well, what if we just have it where it's both our AIs? So he's actually making that right now. So it's going to be both of our AIs talking, just a single video. He's taking that, turning that into avatars, and that was the tie-in, avatars, Katara, and whatnot. But I didn't even think about that, right? It's like AI agents, AI personifications now. It's like, okay, well, now I'm everywhere always.
You're everywhere always. I've done this, and this is actually one of the few things, because you end up playing around a lot with different AI tools. People send them to you, you check them out. And so I tried out 11 Labs, which is a tool to record your voice, and then you could, paste a script in there, and it will read the script as if it was you. And it does a very good job of taking tonality and pacing. And so if you record an excited version of yourself, it'll be excited. If you record, a slow and depressed version, it'll talk really slow and depressed. And it's very good. And so I'm now scared, because like, what world are we living in that now my voice is living in this tool that anyone can take and use however they want, potentially, right?
Right.
And then you combine that with something like HeyGen. HeyGen's a video generation tool based in LA. You can have a live version of yourself with your own mannerisms that you're used to doing, talking in your tone and pace. And it's almost not detectable right now. And I think that's one, terrifying, but two, like, oh, is the internet just going to be this like goop of a bunch of AI generated avatar videos, and there's going to be no quality? But then it comes back to community, right? It comes back to your community is really important, because there's that built-in, like, you mentioned trust built in with your community, that, hey, this is real and this is great. And then there's the aspect of in-person stuff, and offline stuff might become extremely more valuable. A coffee with you now has 10 times the value that it does than doing something like this, because it's real, it's genuine, and so it's not some pre-recorded script.
Right. And I think this was really discussed or thought about in the early stages of neural networks, because the whole goal was, and the thought was, that to get what we have today, that we effectively have to model every neuron in the human brain to be able to copy it. I think that's really the true sort of real singularity moment still at this point is where you could
Okay.
essentially take every single neuron, you could map it, and then you have a version of yourself, right? Because if you
Right.
kind of put that in context, like it's even with, let's say, a single video, I mean, how much is it really going to capture of the kind of conversation you and I would actually have versus
Right. What it's trained to. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Like it's the scripting and the immediate response is not there yet. You can still get a real-time response pretty quick. But if you have a keen eye, which all of us will develop if these tools become omnipresent, like you can quickly tell, oh, this is an AI version versus this is a real version. And we did similar. We dropped our website into Notebook ML, which is the Google product, and right in there you can have a conversation. Write a podcast about Katara, a 20-minute podcast, talk about the product and everything you have, and it wrote it, and it was honestly impressive. And I was probably more excited about it than my other co-founder. His thought was like, oh yeah, these voices everyone's going to start to recognize, and they're going to realize this is a fake podcast and immediately tune out. I was like, oh, probably. But when it's your first time hearing it, you're like, this is amazing. This is so cool to hear. It really was like, a high quality produced podcast. I was actually very impressed.
Oh yeah, I mean the quality is getting so much better. Even 2 years ago, I felt like I could immediately see if something was AI, and now I feel like there's things that are emerging where it's like you need to look at it even beyond that extra couple seconds, kind of like minute, and really see like okay. But if you're talking about voice, I mean that's pretty easy to ultimately get down.
Yep,
I think
it is.
I really think then kind of it's like the era of human enablement is where we're at the moment because
Right.
you talk about podcasts. So when I first started the show, ChatGPT was out, but it wasn't to the level that it is today. And so I would do all the research, everything by hand, and I could do one episode a week max. Now I can easily do 3, and that's what I schedule for. It's like I could effectively do more, but the enablement of that, and then being able to be essentially so far ahead too, because I could, let's say I'm going to do 3 a week. Well, that's just actual my 6 hours of time being invested into it. But I have really deep, high quality outlines for the next however many shows. It's like, and then I can go build a product, and then I can go launch 6 campaigns. It's like that. What we're truly in right now is that era of human enablement more than anything.
Yep. Human enablement. And then I don't know about you, but I really struggle with the shiny object syndrome of wanting to do all these things.
Yeah.
And then, and maybe a little bit of the ADD of like, oh, now I have 700 things that I need to do or remember to do each day. Because all these tools are so great and I can do all of them, but I got to remember to do them and how to do them. And each one has its own nuance. So,
oh, exactly. No, that's so true. That's so true. Yeah.
It like
when I
flows a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. When I took a brief hiatus from the show for like 6 months, I came back and I had to like relearn the script and the tools. And it's like, okay, well, you just got to not stop.
Yep.
Like that was the barrier, was just the remembering of how to do all the things.
Yep. Exactly. I've been doing a lot of like Loom videos for the team where it's like I'll build it, I'll set it up, and then create the Loom so that I can hand it off, and that's been helpful, and then a pretty good reference to be like, okay, where did you get stuck? What did you need to do to get it done? But it's funny when you're using some of these tools for content creation or optimization that are plugins, like you really are deep in thought to try to get to the point where it's actually useful. And so that's, I think, something we'll probably see is what does the management of that look like? It's like the equivalent of like a password keeper on steroids. Here is your playbook for how you run your household and how you run your career and how you run your social life.
Right. No, I like that. And one of the things you were talking about earlier, it invited the Matrix vibes, where essentially as video becomes able to entirely spoof a person, their voice, and perhaps we're in multiple areas at once. I got podcast Jacob running, got marketer Jacob running, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's like, and you've kind of, I don't know, there was a post on LinkedIn that it was a CEO who essentially had a really rough situation where somebody spoofed him doing interviews and asking for things which were not appropriate to a real person.
Oh, wow.
And so there was a real person that was getting interviewed by a fake version of him. And to her, it was real because she actually went through. And then, so, there was a post just a couple days ago on that. But it's like, at some point we get to the level where it's like for our safety, a lot of people would be like, okay, you should just go in a matrix version and, you know, this little matrix bubble
Yep.
for your own safety with AI just running the world.
Well, I think it's funny. Maybe a long time ago, probably more than 10 years ago, my friend sent me this meme, which was I accepted, you know, Apple's terms and conditions, and it said I'm a cat, and then now I'm a cat. And, you know, and I was like, that's the world that we're kind of in. Like with these video generation tools or these, you know, voice tools, it's like the terms and conditions, how are they actually using your data? Who owns the data once you put it in? You know, what I guess rights are you giving away? And so I've even started like copying pasting the entire terms into ChatGPT and be like, hey, give me the key points, anything I need to be worried about before I sign up for XYZ new tool, just because I'm doing it mostly because I'm curious and I want to see like, is there some sort of advantage I can get by being early in a new tool? But now I'm losing sleep every night because I'm like, well, there's video and voice of me, and I'm gonna get cloned like that CEO guy, and people are gonna start, you know, doing interviews as fake James.
Yep. So, no, right off that note is you mentioned about the terms and conditions, the data. So there's LLMs, okay. There's LQMs. Are you familiar with LQMs as well?
I'm not. No.
So large quantitative models.
Okay.
So you could think it's not exactly Gronk, but it's what Gronk is trying to also interpret within that, right? So it's basically deeper quantitative ability, and you could use it across various applications like drug discovery and material science and things like that. And then I haven't read this paper, I definitely should, but Facebook launched these LCMs, large concept models, which essentially, instead of processing information, it's going to be a simplification, but direct linearly, that's how they represented LLMs. But essentially, large concept models form it, you know, and are able to understand concepts on a deeper level because they separate the information and then re-aggregate it into kind of a deeper understanding. But basically, these different types of models are coming out. You talk about terms and conditions. One thing I've been thinking of for so long is essentially LHMs, like large human models. Like, why not just, if you took my activity that I do over a sufficient enough time, I mean, actually my clicks, my searches, my how I use tools, couldn't you effectively just model me, you know, model a person to what they actually do, and then that role just becomes completely understood? Yeah. I mean, it's like
how I guess, you know, you'd have to think about how would that evolve? How would your LHM evolve on that? Because yeah, I could do it. How do you keep it updated? Because I think what's so great about, you know, the stuff that you're doing over the last 3 months, you've learned and you've improved your process, and then you've automated some of that process, which is exactly how automation should be done. It's like when we bring on a new client, I'm like, okay, what are all the tasks that are digital and completely online that you do every time? Literally, it's painful to write out, but you write it out one time. I can automate that for you and create a new process, and you won't have to do that thing again, as long as you just write out every single step. And I think that's like the other misconception on these agents is you think you can do all these things, but yeah, each agent like kind of breaks right now after 5 or 7 tasks. Like it kind of can't do more than that. And a task is like opening up Chrome browser. That's one task. Like going to Google, that's another task. So you need a lot of these agents to work together. And then, you know, if you create your LHM, which I like, you know, how do you decide which ones get swapped out during which process, which agents to use? I mean, that's a really interesting concept. And I think it would be tough because I'll give you an example. Running sales for so long, early Resite days, we could cold email and we got great responses. We ran almost 80% of our revenue was generated from outbound cold email early days. Because we were just looking like, hey, this person's having success. We thought you might be interested. I recently tried to do a very similar playbook, you know, that worked for me really well in the past with Katara, and literally donut hole, 0, because the world's evolved and the cold email is not responsive. So your LHM might be doing the thing, and you know the results just diminish because marketers tend to ruin everything, and you know everyone will be doing the same thing, and no one will be reading email. And I think, you know, there's probably a handful of reasons why, you know, that particular tactic and channel didn't work out. But like your LHM is going to have to constantly improve and iterate. And so it's like, I guess you'll have to be just like one day ahead of that model, right? Like it's just going to
Right.
constantly have to be training on what you're doing.
Right. Yeah. It's just you think that, and I'm sure it's already being done in some form or fashion. Because if you think about what you mentioned in terms of AI assistance, it's like for an AI agent to be or AI assistant to be truly effective, it should understand me. So that's when I think of Copilot. It's like Copilot should already be doing that to a whole nother level. We should be interacting with it more. It should be emerging and popping up and saying, "Hey, this specific thing, let's get this done," or "Let me take this action." Right? We're definitely going there.
We're getting
So
there. And I think it'll be baby steps, like a tool that would be really helpful for my day to day right now would be if it could prioritize, if it could just give me a tag, like just go through and classify every single message I got while I slept. Because we have teams in Europe. And so if I could just wake up and say, hey, here's all the messages, here's the priority of all those messages, here's the urgency of all those messages, here's the ones you can delegate, and like just have that ready to go. So that's a 1 minute exercise versus, my startup is like almost an hour of like going through and sifting through stuff to get caught up. I mean, that would be a great AI, agent that could help me do my job better.
I'm glad it's not just me. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Got your 5, 6 apps you check every day, check it in. That's your.
I mean, I'm sure every high performing person does this, and it's like the world doesn't stop when you go to sleep. And so you wake up to this like just bombardment every day. And you're like, all right, which one first?
You talk about high performance person. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, you talk about high performance person, and you're someone who exited a few companies, building another company. We talked about a little bit, touched briefly on the Ironman piece. So I want to kind of open it up more to how you stay extremely productive, how you're able to, train and build companies and things like that, and how you stay high productive in your life.
Yeah. Well, I got into Ironman because I always had a dream of becoming a professional athlete, and that didn't work out on the baseball front. And it was one of those things where the sport was kind of small enough and I was actually good enough at it. Like I could see I had a shot at becoming a pro. And so that what motivated me a ton. And I think it really helped the business side because it just required so much like consistency and discipline that automatically just through osmosis bled into how I approached work. And so that was one really good thing. It also forces you to trim out all the fat. If you're having to cycle a crazy amount every single week and, basically hit these consistent goals of cycling, running, and swimming, like you're going to have to say no to a lot of other stuff. And so it really forced me to focus on like what's important right now, what's important 6 inches in front of my face, and doing that in work, no different than the app we were talking about a few seconds ago. It's like, okay, what if I'm going to be at the office for 8 hours, and at the time, if I was doing demos, that means I can only pick 8 demos. I can only do 8 1-hour Zooms. Okay, if I only have 8, who are the 8 that I'm going to want to do? What's going to be the best way, to get to the goal that I want to do? And then what things can I do today that will save me time tomorrow type deal? But one of the funny things, like people would always ask, oh, how do you spend so much time training? And it's like, well, actually, I was doing all sales at the time. And if we were working on a deal, one of my favorite companies we worked with was a grocer out of Canada. They had 500 stores. And, it was about over $500,000 deal by the time it was all said and done over the 3 years. And I would go out on these 4 or 5 hour cycling rides in the Malibu mountains. And I would just think about this deal and the people involved and all the little pieces. And like, it would just come together as I was like cycling up these hills that I didn't want to be thinking about cycling up these hills. And so like, it helped so much with when I was on the bike, I was thinking about work and, it would help me get through all the deals and you kind of see around corners and get things done. So, I think it doesn't have to be, I'll admit, like I probably rotated to an extreme side. But if you're someone that can get in, the hour and a half or hour workout, 4 or 5 times a week, I'm sure you will find yourself being more productive it's not going to be tomorrow, but you will just find that you'll get like 1% better every single day. And at the end of the year, you'll be literally like a machine.
That's fantastic because I had mentioned this in our call. I was training for an Ironman when I was younger, and it was a lot of the exact same thing. But I feel like I lost touch with that over the last few years when I'm just like trying to grow, trying to build, trying to scale. Where I feel like I feel like for me, it's like I need to work all the time.
Yeah.
But endorphins are a great thing. They'll help you think
They're-
clearly.
They help you think clearly, and then it's also, I would always train and ride with people that were really also highly capable, and they had really great jobs, or worked on great companies, um, and their perspective was always super helpful too. So it was like, you know, I agree with you. It feels like you need to go 16 hours a day every single day, but I like strongly feel that if I worked, slightly less, and I was really strict on making sure that, the one or two workouts were scheduled into my calendar and I actually got them done, like that would set me up and fuel my whole week. And I'd be so much more productive, even though it was less actual hours in front of the laptop.
Right. Because it's like business today it's more about you have to have that endurance and the quality. And the quality comes from thinking clearly, and the endurance
Yep.
comes from having your mind in a good place and your body in a good place. Allows you
Yep.
to kind of maximize your time and crunch as much productivity within less hours, but more fruit.
Yeah. I mean, it comes down to like how crisp and sharp is your decision making. At the end of the day, that is the differentiator. Because I always kind of chuckle, like the actual physical task of someone who's doing data entry versus pick your best tech CEO. They're very similar. You're typing on a keyboard for the majority of your day. It's like the difference is the level of decision making and thought, and the way you're thinking about the problem and approaching the problems. I mean, there's a lot more in between that, but like the majority of the task is you're typing. And so, okay,
Right.
how do you jump that gap, and how do you improve and level up? It's all decision making. So when you build your LHM, make sure you really crisp, sharp decision making.
Smart. I like that. And it aligns with something I tweeted, or it actually was on LinkedIn. I dropped this where it says, essentially, you just have to put the right things in the computer and
Yeah.
money comes out.
Yep.
Like
100%.
that's it.
Yep.
What are you putting in the
That's it.
computer?
Exactly. You just got to put the right keys in the right order on the computer, and magically, you're delivering a ton of value to people.
Mhm. So what's your one takeaway then, or action item, next step for people who have listened to this and they're an entrepreneur, they're an investor? What's something that they can do in their life that'll make a tremendous positive impact?
I mean, sleep is the ultimate, in my opinion. And it's something we haven't talked about at all. But like, if you can schedule your sleep, I've started doing a bedtime alarm, and it goes off every night at 8:30, because I was working really late into the night, and nighttime James like tends to be a little bit easier on, like, oh yeah, you can stay up an hour because this project's interesting to you. Now,
Yep.
8:30, that alarm goes off. I shut it down, like no more laptop, no more screens. And I think that's really helped the energy level. It's helped, me think clear. It's helped me do a lot more. Um, and so I think one thing tomorrow, set a sleep timer. And then if it's two things, it's go try one of these um, new tools out there, and I can promise that you're going to get stuck in it. It's going to get in like some crazy prompt loop that's really going to frustrate you, but just keep at it and keep trying these things, because they can deliver you a ton of value once you learn them.
Well, there you have it, James. It's been great to have you on the show. Episode 47 is officially in the books.
Nice. Thank you so much for having me, Jacob. This was great.
Bet. We'll talk again soon.
All right.
Thanks,
Sounds
James.
good.
Here we are.
Hey. Great.
I'm gonna drop your links and everything down below for Katara as well. So
you have them, right?
yep, I got them. I got them. Yep.
Yeah, you did a great job with all the questioning. I hope I was a good guest, and hope this is hope 47 gets you the most views yet.
Let's go. So from here, we'll have this edited by the next day or two, and then we'll share all the clips with you. You want the raw footage as well?
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't have an exact game plan right now, because it's the first one where we'd actually get the clips back, but I'm sure they will go on our YouTube. I've been posting the direct videos on Twitter because I think they get more engagement that way. But yeah, we'll use them up.
Perfect. Yeah. So I'll send you all the raw stuff, and then it'll come into that same drive folder. Probably be 15 to 20 clips, and then the long form video.